right, well,
Awesome.
why don't we get going? I want to introduce everyone to Carolyn Vetter. She is a sports psychologist and is here to help us with our variety of issues, whether it's nerves riding at home or show nerves. When we get there, we're fine at home, and boom, all of a sudden we get to a horse show and just seem to have meltdowns. So she's here to help us with tools on how to change that behavior within ourselves, as well as how to address probably prior to the event as well. So, Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us, and it's to you.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I really love sharing this information. I wish I had it when I was a young rider showing all the time. So let me just introduce myself a little bit. And actually, I think I have a little PowerPoint because I'm a very visual learner. So I was going to combine those two things. So let me see if I can share that now with everyone and then go from there. Right. Put it in slideshow view. Can everyone? It's loading. We'll see if you can you all see that?
Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, great. So I am both a clinical and sports psychologist, and I got trained. I'm here in Berkeley, California. I got trained at a graduate school in Berkeley, focused on clinical psychology. And after I graduated and got licensed, I was thinking about ways that I could incorporate my equestrian life, horse life, into my practice. And so this is when I found kind of sports psychology and really started to specialize in this work with equestrians specifically. So I have a private practice. I actually meet with clients all throughout California and Oregon. I'm licensed in both states, so I meet with a lot of people individually to help them work on improving performance, managing nerves, improving confidence, all those good things that help us, do the sport that we love. And I also personally am an equestrian. I started riding when I was young, about 6 years old. I mainly rode in the hunter jumper discipline growing up, and I just very recently started taking dressage lessons. And it's been a really lovely new venture for me and so, so different than riding hunter jumper. So, kind of managing my own things, going through learning a new skill as an adult amateur rider, at this point in my life, which has been really fun and exciting. Um, so that's me. I'll talk a little bit more about what I like to call our why, kind of why we engage in this sport. I'll share a little bit more about that on my end, but I do just want to name a few things as we hop in. We're going to try and get through a good amount of information today in terms of like information about fear and anxiety, as well as a lot of tools that might help with that. So bear with me. It might be a lot for 1 hour. Hopefully you'll be able to take some notes and have some things kind of sink in later on. Also, as such, please feel free to interrupt me with questions, ask me to clarify something if it doesn't make sense. I am super happy to try and reword something or help people understand what I am trying to get across versus just pretending you get it and moving along. Please stop me and we'll kind of focus more on that. And I will try and track questions in the chat as we go. I am realizing I should pull that up on my screen. There we go. All right. So let's hop in. So I kind of briefly touched on what we were going to talk about today. I'm just going to briefly talk about what is sports psychology and how can it be helpful. Then we're going to talk about your why, and I'll talk about mine. We'll talk about fear and anxiety, the difference between them, what they are, tools to help manage them, whether that's at home when you're riding or at a horse show. And then we're going to wrap up with some values-based goal setting and kind of talking about how do we set goals to help us kind of focus throughout, the year or the show season. And then I'd like to leave some time at the end also for question answer portion too. All right. So the difference between sports psychology and clinical psychology is that clinical psychology kind of has a very broad focus, right? It's kind of for anyone struggling with any kind of mental health concern, general life stressor, going through a life transition. It can be a helpful space for them to come talk through that transition. And it's more broad, it's more vague. Sports psychology and sport and performance consulting services have the specific focus of helping someone or an athlete enhance their performance through working on the mental side of the game. And this is done through mental skills training. So those are the tools that me as a consultant will help you as the athlete learn to encourage kind of best performance regardless of the situation, right? So in our case as equestrians, that would be what tools can help you ride at your best even when there's hail on the roof at a horse show, right? So some of the ways that these tools can improve performance and kind of I like to call it developing your mental skills tack trunk. So you can kind of work through and practice these mental skills both in sessions and hopefully outside of the time together. Also developing management strategies for fear and anxiety or really any emotion that comes up. Also setting clear goals, like I mentioned, values-based goal setting can really be helpful. How do we kind of get more self-compassion in the face of mistakes? And just to name a few other kind of examples we'll talk about today, like visualization and creating a pre-show routine to really get prepared for the horse show ahead. All right, so your why. I'll share a little bit about my why first to get the ball rolling. And then what I'm going to do is invite you to write on something, either on your laptop or preferably handwrite your why. I will ask if anyone's comfortable sharing. You're welcome to share, but there's no pressure, no need. So my why do I engage in this sport? Why do I love riding horses? So a really good example of when I was faced with really confronting this question for myself is when I was a teenager in the hunter jumper discipline. I kind of reached the point at which I either needed, based on my horse's abilities, I either needed to change my career, my riding career, or I needed to kind of stay at the level I was at. She was able to jump like 2.3, 2.6, but anything above 3 foot was just too hard on her body. So I had to make the choice, you know, also financial aspect of things in terms of like, can we afford a horse that can do the 3 foot up? Or do I want to stay where I'm at and keep this horse that I've been building a relationship with for at that point, I think we had been together for about probably 5 years. And it was at first a challenging decision for me. And then I kind of naturally connected with this why. Like, why do I keep coming to the barn? Why do I enjoy this? Why do I want to keep doing this? And for me, that was the relationship with my horse. Her name was Flirt. And I really appreciated during that time in my life having a really solid relationship with the horse that I was riding. And in that moment, it really changed the goals I had for myself. I no longer really thought about jumping higher if it wasn't going to work out for the horse that I had, because my why was relationship based, right? Relationship with the horse. So I'm going to invite you all, take a couple minutes, think about why it is that you enjoy the sport. What brought you to this sport? And what keeps you going? What keeps you coming back when things get hard, as they naturally do? So take a couple minutes, jot down some ideas, and then if anyone is willing to share, I would love to hear. Oh, yes. See a raised hand. Are you willing to share? Do you have a question?
I'm willing to share.
Awesome. Is everyone feeling ready to kind of move in that direction?
Me too.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, whoever would like to start, what is your why?
Okay, I'll go ahead. For me, it's changed over the years. I mean, I've been doing horses for 50 something years. So when I was a kid, I think it's just because I didn't like organized sports, and it was a way to avoid doing all that. And I didn't like the ballet my parents put me in. So it was more of an avoidance thing. But then over time, like you were saying, it was definitely, as a child growing up, it was the partnership. And I grew up in a family where there was a lot of issues. So it was definitely, the horse was my savior. I mean, I would have probably ended up being either on drugs or something horrible. So that's it. But now in this stage in my life, because we're retired now, we had to really think about the why, because if you look in my backyard, do we want to be those retired people that are, which is fine, traveling all the time, but this is my why. I've got a covered arena back here.
Ooh,
See it?
Wow.
Yeah.
nice.
And my why is standing over there. If you can see him. Can you see him?
Yes.
Hi, Sterling. Hi, buddy. So my why now, because it's evolved, right? I mean, I love the partnership, but I am so passionate and excited that I finally have no children at home. We do have grandchildren, but that's fine. And I'm not working 60, 70 hours a week. And I can just immerse myself into this whole horse thing. And so like I said, it's a partnership, but I'm also so excited that I can go ahead, and I got a really fancy pony to ride now. and go and do the dressage competitions, and also meet all these wonderful people that I'm meeting in that world. So that's really kind of, it's a combination of things for me. I love to compete. I competed a lot when I was a teenager, and I think I'm in that circle and it's coming back. So I know I'm saying a lot of different things, but I got a lot of whys, I guess.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I think it's a good point. Our why might be a lot of different things, and it might develop over time. Thank you so much for sharing.
I guess I'm up next.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So my why is the more I improve my skills, I get this, and we probably all get this, when you've got it's almost transcendent when you've got the movement working properly, when you get in that lovely energy loop and and the horse is digging in and their back is up and you're just like flying down. I mean, not literally, but you're just in this really, really lovely energy. And so to me, that's why is I love that feeling. And then what I've discovered that is I will be much more focused about achieving that feeling if I have something to aim towards. And so now after a hiatus, I'm getting back into showing this year. I was showing on my off the track thoroughbred, who is still around at age 27, but I bought a fancy pony like you, Heather. Mine's shorter. And and also I've retired recently. So now I can immerse myself and do this before I'm too damn old to do it. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Would anyone else like to share their why?
I kind of have a totally different why, but I'll try.
Yeah, that's okay.
A little bit different from Heather. I was the kid that grew up in a horsey area and always wanted a horse. I rode everybody else's horses, but my father was like, nope, you'll be interested in boys, never have a horse.
Mhm.
So as soon as I had a job that I could buy my first horse, I bought a horse whose saddle could probably sell for more than I bought him for. Quarter Clydesdale, quarter horse, Palomino. He loved me, I loved him. He needed me, I needed him. Rode in the St. Patrick's Day parade, that kind of stuff. I didn't know anything. I had no knowledge really. I just knew that relationship of looking in a horse's eyes was what I needed. Fast forward, I bought a horse that didn't know much about, moved him to Colorado, came back. I'm a event planner by profession, so I'm always with people. These days I say I hate people, because I just want to be with my horse,
Yeah.
And I brought him back. I had no business riding this horse. I was in Oakland, at the old, what was it called? Old Piedmont Stables. Had worked a week, took this thoroughbred up the hill into a running race. It was bad. So he ran, spun, did everything. I didn't come off, but I just put the reins over his head and said, go, because nobody would let me through the race. It was a little petrifying. Everyone thought I was dead because they saw the horse come back. So when I fast forward to really wanting to learn, my mother had gotten very ill. And I needed to conquer that fear that I had that day in the Oakland Hills. So I went to a trainer. I didn't care. I didn't want to wear things that matched. I just wanted to ride. And I got on this schoolmaster that would not give me a right canter to save my life for 6 months. And I would go at night after work and I would say, cantering, and I'd yell it in the arena and I'd start going. And I finally got that right lead canter and I was hooked. So I bought my first horse and I evented. Started jumping over, like gallon containers, and then went through training. But he was diagnosed with arthritis, and I said, fine, we'll just do dressage. I don't need to, I'm not going to sell him. I don't need another horse. I want this horse. He passed at 32 at my house. I have the horses here at home. I've got a 30-year-old that I'm doing a century ride on in a month. So it's progressed to my entire family saying, why don't you get rid of the damn horses so you can travel the world? And I said, well, I traveled the world before I was 22. So I would like to be with my horses. And I had a horse that medically retired who I thought was going to be my partner. He's only 14. I kind of gave up. I was miserable, depressed, horrible, mean to everybody. I needed to ride every day. So I got an 18-year-old Grand Prix horse that someone told me about in Florida. I went and put my butt in the airplane and I bought him. And it's been a challenge, a real challenge. It's the first horse I've had that's way above me. And he's teaching me so much. So the love affair has started after 2 years. And, my mom eventually passed. She understood why I needed the horse. But for me, it's just the relationship. I don't care. I mean, I'd love to get a great score, but I love going someplace with my horse and talking to him and some people, but I still hate people. I just rather be. So that's kind of my story. I started without a horse and now you can't stop me. I'm just passionate about every day and mucking stalls, and 20 years I've been here. So I do it myself.
Awesome.
Kind of.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I love the kind of diversity and also the undertones just in general that I'm hearing about, like the relationship. Even if there's competitiveness and wanting to achieve, there's also the relationship, right? Which I think makes our sport particularly unique. So for the sake of time, I'm going to keep going. If we have time at the end and you want to, if anyone else wants to share their why, then we will absolutely circle back to this, but I want to make sure we get through everything I have for today. So next we're going to talk about fear and anxiety. So fear and anxiety are pretty different in certain ways, right? So as you can see here, fear is a response that we have both somatically and emotionally to an actual threat to our life. right? So an example I like to give is like if a bear or a tiger comes at us, that's something scary, right? That's a threat to our safety and our life. And so it is very adaptive, important, and helpful for us to feel fear because it helps activate our nervous system, which we'll talk more about in a minute, and get us out of the threatening situation as best it can, right? Anxiety is a response to a perceived threat. So not an actual real life threat, but something that we think might be threatening. Here's the rub, is that we can start to feel anxious or feel fearful somatically just based on a thought that scares us. So our brains are incredible. We are incredible beings, right? However, it is somewhat challenging then in the face of these things when just a thought that we have can activate our nervous system. The good news is there are tools to help manage this, but it is something that we do have to think about managing just as humans, right? We're very adaptive in this way. I also want to name, I very much like to reframe any sort of overcoming language as managing, because I don't fully believe that we can overcome fear or emotions because fear is just a somatic response, right? It is just something that happens in us to a threatening situation. And so I actually don't think that overcoming it is actually a good thing because we need it to keep us safe, right? Now, managing it, we can manage it when it comes up. And that's the same for any emotions. So I'm going to take a little detour here just for a minute to talk about emotions in general and what the rebound effect is. So any emotion that we have, so let's stick with the example of anxiety here, right? If we start to feel anxious before a horse show, right? And then we're like, no, I'm not anxious. It's fine. I'm not anxious. Let me just push that away. Everything's fine. We're fine, right? Can reroute, go about your day, and then it comes up again. And you're like, oh, no, I'm not anxious. I'll just push that away, right? Every time we push anxiety down, it just goes somewhere else in our body, whether that be our stomach, our joints, our head, our neck, etc. And the other thing is the next time we feel that way, right? So in this example, we feel really anxious a couple times before the show and we push it away and we push it away and we push it away. Then we get anxious at the show. We're going to feel anxious in that moment, plus all the other times that we felt anxious and haven't processed it. And that's what the rebound effect is. So it ends up increasing, enlarging the amount of anxiety we feel at the show because there was, like a pushing away of it previously. So what are some things that activate anxiety, right? Or what are some things for us that activate anxiety? I've listed some here. I'm also super open to hearing if any of these don't fit or if you have ones to add, right? So some of them are pressure from external people like parents or trainers. Internal pressure we put on ourselves to like do a certain thing or look a certain way or have matching outfits, right? Like fear of making mistakes, worrying about the future, trying to be perfect, trying to win, having a fresh horse or a horse that doesn't feel quite right, in the process of recovering from an injury, or it's your first ride after you've recovered from an injury, audience members, right? Trainers, parents, weather, etc. So I want to just open the floor. What are some things maybe that haven't been listed or ones that have been that are anxiety triggers for you all within this realm or maybe at horse shows?
Being judged.
Being judged, yeah.
Being by yourself, going in front of, I mean, I don't always think about it, but just being the only one in there and and a judge is telling you what they think of your riding.
Yeah, it's a great one because that happens at every horse show, right?
Mhm.
We kind of put ourselves in that position and it can evoke anxiety because it can feel threatening.
And we pay for it.
Yes, and we pay for it.
We're
Making
really
the most
crazy.
of your money. That could activate anxiety, yeah?
Good, sure.
I know for me, I don't know, I've done quite a bit of showing. The actual competition doesn't freak me out. Like I just sort of look at it like feedback. I mean, if it's at a major championship or something, that's different. But what kills me is the freaking warm-up arena. And it's not
Yes.
even like it's because that to me, that's where the horse is gonna spook. That's where someone else is gonna run into you. That's where the unknown happens. And I don't know, for me, it's the fear of what could possibly happen in the warm-up arena.
In
It
the
is not
warm-up.
the competition arena.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one too. I forgot to list that one here, but warm-up arenas can be really anxiety and fear-provoking.
I fully admit I took one look at that blowing tent. I scratched and took my horse home Saturday morning. I was at Murrieta. I did not stay. I did not compete. Schooled and went
Yeah,
home.
yeah,
Well, that's smart.
yes.
Totally not embarrassed to admit it. Like
Good.
there's
That is actually something that, you know, I hopefully we'll talk about later, but I'll mention it now just in case, is when we feel that level of fear or anxiety, sometimes the best choice is to just pause, stop, regroup however we need to, or scratch and go home and try another day. Because forcing your way through fear or anxiety can actually end up being pretty dangerous, right? If we
Yeah.
pretend that we don't feel fear, then we might not be able to make the right kind of decisions to keep ourselves and our horses safe. So I love that choice. That I'm all for that.
I admire that choice.
to be fair,
Is
I'm in
it-
Sacramento, so it was a much easier choice. I can understand if you came from like 3 hours
Closer.
away, that wouldn't have been so easy.
Yeah,
Can I ask a question to clarify?
absolutely.
Is there a difference between anxiety and just being nervous? Like do you perceive a threat for both of those? Even if you're just like, oh my gosh, it's just you're just nervous, but you're not afraid of anything. Does that make sense?
Yes, that is a great question. Nervousness is very similar to anxiety. Anxiety is more like the clinical term, right?
Okay.
That people know and use. Same with nervous, but anxiety might feel a little bit more pervasive
Okay.
than nervousness. Nervousness might be a little bit more situational. Anxiety can also be situational too, but fear, anxiety, nervousness, all are felt the same in the body. Which actually brings me to my next slide. Oh, well, we talked about these things. So common mistakes, quote unquote, right? Pushing it away, avoiding it, ignoring early signs, meaning our body first tells us when we're feeling anxious, fear, or nervousness. And if we can tap into understanding what our body feels like in that moment, we can catch it and manage it really early, which is lovely. Forcing your way through, we touched on that. And also just relying on your equipment to keep you safe. I don't feel like many people really do that at this point in terms of like only feeling safe because you're in a saddle, right? Or you have certain stirrups or you have a bridle on, but that can be a catch. Sometimes people have a false sense of safety. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. This is where our body feels it. So we have two main kind of nervous system states, the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic one is the rest, digest, like right before you go to sleep when you're feeling nice and calm, or after you've had a lovely meal and you're relaxed, like probably in the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for fight, flight, freeze, and faint. So those are like the four main responses to fear, right? Our sympathetic nervous system kicks in and we either fight, we flight, we flee, right? Horses mostly do that one. We freeze sometimes, shut down, get stuck, locked up, or there is a faint response that some people do have where they actually faint, right? So the sympathetic nervous system, as I mentioned before, can get activated by fear and anxiety of either an actual life-threatening event or perceived threatening events, right? Windy plastic bag, tent blowing over. That could become a threatening event. But at that point in time when nothing's happened, it's just perceived, we're thinking about what could happen, right? We're like, oh, that could fly over in XYZ. The other thing that's actually pretty cool is excitement can also activate the sympathetic nervous system. So I want to make note that the sympathetic nervous system isn't bad, right? It actually can get activated and give us energy we need to perform really well. So when we're feeling a little bit anxious and feeling excited. So you have to have both. We can use the tool of starting to talk to ourselves about the fact that actually part of this is excitement, right? We tend to focus more on the negative things than the positive things. Another little kind of default, not so great thing about our brains, right? We focus on the negative because those are the ones that would be dangerous to us. The positive things, not dangerous to us, not a threat. So when we start to feel a little anxious, excited, which I imagine most of us feel when we go to a horse show, you go for a reason, you're kind of excited about it, right? We can start to have an internal narrative that when my body feels this way, I'm actually feeling excited. Now, you have to be feeling a little bit of excitement for that to work, right? We can't turn anxiety fully into excitement just by telling ourselves. But if you're feeling excited, you can use this tool to say, okay, my body is feeling this way, but it feels this way when I'm anxious, nervous, and when I'm excited. So actually, I think I'm excited right now. Let me think about that some more. And I like to use Dr. Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain just to kind of show the nervous system a little bit more in terms of how it impacts us in our decision making. So if this is our brainstem, and this is kind of our emotion center, this is so simplified, our emotion center here. These are our frontal lobes. We use for decision making, planning, thinking through things, right? When we start to feel fear, nervousness, anxiety, any really strong emotion, it starts to go like this. And then, whoop, they completely flip offline. So our frontal lobes, our ability to make decisions, to plan ahead, and to kind of think through things, completely go offline when we get too activated emotionally. And this happens for everybody because we don't need to know, like map out our whole route running away from a bear that's chasing us. We just need to go, right? So it's kind of a way of conserving energy. So all of the tools that we're going to talk about today are ways of pulling that back online and managing the emotional stuff that's coming up so we can pull that back online and then make decisions from that space. All right, so management strategies for horse show. Oh, I think I missed one. Hold on, yes. Okay, so management strategies for any kind of nervousness, anxiety, or fear. Then we'll talk next specifically about horse show nerves. So management strategies for this kind of somatic response. One of my favorite ones, because you can do it anywhere at any time, is breathing. So a really interesting thing is that when we shift into our sympathetic nervous system, we always chest breathe. Some people might notice that. You might be at work and you're chest breathing, and it's like, oh, when did I last take a deep breath into my belly, right? So I'll invite you all now, if you haven't breathed throughout the day, just to take a couple deep breaths into your belly. Breathing is one of my favorite tools because when we breathe deeply into our belly and use our diaphragm, we can literally tell our nervous system to shift states. We can say, there is not a threat here. I'm safe. It's okay. We can shift. We don't have to be so activated. And it helps bring those frontal lobes back online, just simply through breathing deeply. Now, this might take a little while, right, of breathing deeply and refocusing on your breath consistently, but it will eventually help with the activated state and help bring your body back down, your mind back online, and it is just so helpful. Also, as horse people, I'm sure you all have noticed that your horses respond when you're in that more grounded, deep breath state, right? They're more fluid and relaxed because it also relaxes our body in the saddle when we breathe all the way into our system, right? And we use our diaphragm. We relax ourselves and our horses relax. So it has a really nice benefit to the partnership as well. Another really great one that I like is a progressive muscle relaxation. That one is helpful if you notice that when you get nervous, anxious, fearful, you hold tension in a particular part of your body. Like for me, it's my shoulders and my neck. That is just like they go to my ears, right? So then I can practice through this progressive muscle relaxation. There's some guided versions online. I can practice centrally, kind of just identifying this area as a place of tension and trying to just relax those particular muscles. So it really helps in identifying particular parts of your body that respond to anxiety and fear, and then being able to relax them. And then over time, right, you build this skill so that when you start to feel this way in the saddle, you could maybe relax that particular part of your body. Another great one is meditation. And by meditation, for me, the way that I like to describe it, it's not the practice of sitting and being present the whole time. That's so hard, right? Our brains think so many thoughts a day. But meditation for me is the practice of continually returning to the present moment. So our mind's going to wander and then we'll return. That's the skill that helps so much with any kind of anxiety that tries to slingshot you into the future, is then to return to the present moment. And you can do that through focusing on your breath, focusing on your body, thinking about your various different senses, thinking about what you smell, what you hear, what you see, what you feel, maybe what you taste, like fully coming back to the present moment that is happening right here, right now. And you might have to do that a lot, like pretty often. We defined anxiety versus excitement already. Another good one is singing in the saddle, because you can't sing and not breathe at the same time. So it helps you relax. If it makes you laugh, even better, right? So singing a song you know well that comes easily, or singing along to music. And then we touched on the present moment again. So for all of these things, I'll say that one of my favorite apps I like to use is an app called Insight Timer. There's a bunch of different meditation apps out there. I'm only recommending this one because I have personal experience with it. I like it because it has a lot of free different guided meditations on it, including diaphragmatic guided breathing. Diaphragmatic breathing is also belly breathing. It just kind of engages the diaphragm to pull the breath down lower. All right. And then just a brief mention for fear specifically, right? If the fear is coming from a particular thing that happened with a particular horse, and your horse or you need to develop a new safety skill, that's great to put into place with your trainer, right? Like a safety stop or something. And that's really specific to like your horse and your experience of where the fear, anxiety, nervousness might be coming from. Okay, any questions on any of those management strategies before we move into the horse show ones? Okay. Awesome. All right, so for horse shows specifically, first thing, preparation is the key to success, right? So practicing a dressage test at home a few times before doing it for the first time at the show, really helpful for managing nerves, because once you breathe and get your frontal lobes back online, you can remind yourself, wait a second, I've done this so many times, right? I know what I'm doing. We're going to be good. And then having a pre-show routine is something that can be really structured and really helpful. So sometimes I'll meet with clients and just do a pre-show routine session where we create like a pre-show routine together. Based on what it is that's coming up for a person at the horse shows, right? So for example, this would be a very unique combination for you and your horse of whatever it is that brings up horse show nerves for you. So I guess we can make the example of like what to do if the warm-up ring is like my thing that triggers my anxiety and nervousness, right? Breathing, I put on everyone's pre-show routine because I think it's awesome. And then also specific management strategies for the warm-up arena, right? And so those might be going and sitting by the warm-up arena, kind of looking at the chaos that might be ensuing and practicing your management skills, right? Not even on your horse, just like sitting and observing, breathing, returning to the present moment. And then maybe the next time you do it with your horse there. and then you do it on your horse, right? I think the warm-up arena tends to trigger a lot of nervousness for a lot of people because there's so many factors that are outside of your control. And sometimes people in the warm-up arena don't necessarily know how to ride with other people, right? That is not a tool that I can't give you a tool to manage those people, unfortunately. But if you're feeling very nervous and anxious about the what ifs of the warm-up arena, all of the tools to manage nervousness can help manage the what ifs, if that's making sense to everyone. Also, I saw someone named Checklist. I love a checklist. I love a good checklist. Pre-show routine is like a great kind of checklist thing, right? Did I do my breathing, right? Did I do my stretching, right? Did I do visualizations? For some people, that might go on their pre-show routine. So visualization is another really nice tool to have in your kind of tech trunk. And visualization or imagery, it's kind of called those two things, is something that can help us when we're injured. It's something that can help us with nervousness, and it's something that can help us practice a skill. Because the really cool thing about visualization is when we sit down and embody all our senses and then visualize riding, we actually activate the muscles we use when we ride. Like those neurons fire. So we're literally creating those neural pathways, that muscle memory, by visualizing. There are some tips that I like to give in terms of how to do this. Always visualize something positive. So this would be, for example, like your best dressage test yet, whether that was at the show or at home. Either way. If you have a video of it, fantastic. Then you can watch it and integrate it. And if not, just use your memory, right? Your memory to visualize. I also recommend always doing this with your eyes closed because otherwise there's too much visual stimuli. It's just harder, right? And sit somewhere. You could even sit in your show clothes, right? Or your riding clothes to get the full body sensation, right? In terms of incorporating all your senses. Because if you can fully bring yourself into that moment, the visualization is going to be much more powerful. The other thing about visualization is you don't want to sit and visualize for longer than the length of the actual activity. So for example, however long your dressage test is, or however long your jump course is, only visualize for that amount of time. Don't sit and do like 20 minutes at a time because we'll get tired, our brains will go off, right? So it's more effective to do a lot of short visualizations frequently. So like 10 to 12 times a day, which I know sounds like a ton of time, but really it's like 10 to 12 minutes a day because a dressage test or a jump course isn't like 15 minutes long, right? And then all of the tools, again, that we talked about for fear and anxiety, or the ones that you personally find helpful for fear and anxiety, are definitely helpful to implement at a horse show. So those are all the main tools that I like to recommend for these things. The other thing that is important to know, is all of these tools are best practiced first at home when you're feeling calm and relaxed, right? So breathing's going to be easier when you're calm and relaxed. Maybe right before bed, do like 20 diaphragmatic breaths. I like to do that if I can. And if you fall asleep during those, wonderful, it's working perfectly, right? It's helping you relax and go to sleep. And the meditation, do it home when you're calm. Progressive muscle relaxation, do it home when you're calm, right? That's the best place to start building the skill. Because like any new skill, it needs to be practiced. And when everything gets heightened, trying to implement it then is going to be much harder because we have other well-worn pathways of how we like to cope with those things that we're going to be fighting against, right? We're going to have to choose a new way of kind of managing fear, anxiety, nervousness. So practicing often at home is the best first step, and then starting to implement at the barn while you ride and at a horse show. I briefly want to touch on confidence versus self-confidence and how that builds self-trust, because I think that can be a really nice other kind of narrative, internal narrative and tool to work with nervousness and horse shows. So confidence is when we have confidence that we are good at a skill set. One example I like to give of this is like someone who's been playing piano since they were 4 years old can be pretty confident as an older adult that they're good at playing piano, right? Like you've developed this skill, you're going to be good at it now unless you took 20 years off. Self-confidence is being confident in ourselves to manage anything that comes our way, even if we're trying something for the very first time. So it's a very different experience. And we can have self-confidence in the face of doing something new in which we can't really have confidence yet in that, right? Like for me, for example, if I were to go show a dressage test, I've never done that before. So I might not feel at all confident in my skill to like perform well at a show, but I might be able to be self-confident knowing that no matter what happens in the kind of ring, in the arena, I will be able to manage it. I will be able to handle it. And that helps build trust with yourself too. And so this is another really good one for the warm-up arena, right? I can't control what's happening around me. So I might not feel very confident going in here because that person looks like they're fighting with their horse and that horse is spooking and that one's already run into someone else, right? But I can feel confident that I will do what I need to take care of myself and my horse in this space. And that can really help kind of reframe those moments and remind us that we got this. We've done it before. We know how to do this, right? I don't think I have this on here, but another one I want to list is, I actually got this one from my mentor, Jenny Susser. So she likes to have people write down a what do I have the goods for list and keep it like in a little notebook. Keep it in your boot bag or your helmet bag, right? And you list everything that you're good at with, at, around horses. Doesn't have to be riding related. If you are like good at cleaning your tack after every ride or like when it gets dirty, that makes it on the list. If you're really good at scooping manure, that makes it on the list, right? If you're really good at grooming your horse or picking feet, that makes it on the list. And you just keep a running list of everything that you're good at. And you're not going to be 100% perfect at it all the time, but that you feel self-confident in, right? Or that you're confident about this skill that you have, right? Keep a running list of those things. I'll invite all of you today or this week to start the list with like 10 things and keep it going. And then refer back to it as often as you need to. Okay. How are we doing on time? All right. I think I have just enough time to get into values-based goal setting before Q&A. So the other thing that can be really helpful with managing nerves is to prepare through values-based goal setting. This can also really help if we tend to compare ourselves to others. You know, this can be a really nice way of reminding us of our why and reminding us of our values. So I like to say setting goals, right? The SMARTS goals, I love those. They're specific, they're measurable, they're action oriented, they're realistic but challenging, time sensitive. And then the last S is around what support we need to reach that goal. And then incorporating the values that you have within the sport, right? So one value for people might be they value the relationship and partnership and trust with their horse. So what would a goal look like for you for horse showing, right? Maybe it's a goal around how you want your ride to feel that incorporates the value of trust. So that's kind of how that framework works in terms of how you incorporate the value with a goal. I also recommend having more process goals than outcome goals. Because an outcome goal is like, I want to have a 70 on my next dressage test. You either get it or you don't, right? It's pretty this or that. A process goal is a little bit more like, I want to feel connected to my horse 90% of the time during our show. Yeah? Like that is something where the locus of control is more internal to you than to the judge that's judging you and giving you a score. Outcome goals are totally fine, but I think it's important to also have process goals as part of your goals so that you're not only focused on one outcome. And then incorporating turnaround times or flexibility is always really helpful. So when setting goals, it's really helpful to set them flexibly. right? Because what happens if our horse gets hurt or they throw a shoe at the show or, you know, we twist our ankle? So having some flexibility in the goals you set can really kind of make them a little bit more fluid so you can reset them as needed. All right. I think we have just enough time for questions. If we don't have questions, I can circle back to any topic you'd like me to talk more about too in our last little bit.
Not so much a question, but a comment when we were talking about prep. And, you know, before you go into the ring, going over to the ring, watching other people ride, watching things. And I realized at one point that when I was looking at the trainers and people that were, you know, these upper level riders, they weren't sitting around with friends, yakking. They weren't rushing to get their horse ready or whatever. They were actually doing their own, like, a self-assessment. Like I had one trainer who would just say, everybody leave me alone 10 minutes before she had to get on the horse. And she went in the tack room, closed the door, and just got herself focused.
Yeah.
There's something about it. It's weird because I don't know whether I got this from Hunter jumper days or whatever, where it was a little bit more, you know, casual because you're sitting at the back gate for so long, waiting
Yeah.
for the turn to go jump. You know, you just get kind of like la la about the whole thing. And then you just go in, pick up your canter, and off you go.
Yeah.
And hope you remember your course. But with dressage, there's so many micro moments that have to happen. And I think the best ride I don't know whether my score was the best, but the best I ever felt coming out was a ride where I had really taken the time on my own, just quiet time before I had gotten my horse ready. He was just standing in his stall. Boom, I went away. I sat down and I just kind of mentally went through the test, like you're saying, just really, you know, visualize that process. But then when I got in the ring, I did something, and I don't know why I did it because it wasn't planned, but all of a sudden I was the trainer in my head. And I was saying, okay, here comes the corner, half halt, rock him back, push your inside leg, get that hip through, and go. And it was like every single move, I was the trainer in my head instead of my normal going, oh shit, you know, and just, you know, oh, I'm supposed to get shoulder in, oh, you know, and
Yeah.
just really, it was such a difference in how I felt throughout it and coming through it on the backside. It was like, oh my God, I actually was present. Because most of the time, I don't even remember if I do breathe in that 6 minutes that's there, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first started jumping, I had to have people in all the corners. So when I cantered by, they said, breathe. I mean, it was bad. That's how bad my anxiety was. And so having these moments, and as much as I would like to do that every time I get on the horse, I don't do it. And it's like, why am I not doing it? It's because I don't take that quiet time in front of getting on. I'm busy cleaning him up. I'm getting the saddle on. I'm going, oh man, I'm late for my lesson. And, you know, doing all those things. There's never that quiet time. And I think that made a lot of sense to me because taking that time to just like deep breathe, be in the moment. You're here. This is what you're going to go do. Because you know full well the Olympians are doing that. This is serious. This is not like, oh, let's go have some fun. You know, it is fun. And I don't want to take the fun side out of it, but it's more fun when you're present.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know?
I think that's a really beautiful example of like the preparation that can help you get in your optimal zone of performance, right? Is kind of what we call it. I didn't have enough time to really go into that today, but really the idea surrounding that is that you have a zone, right? We all have one that is unique to us, where we actually are activated enough to perform well, but calm enough to also keep our frontal lobes online. And so a lot of the pre-show routine things are to help get you into that zone. And so having quiet time, I think for most people, is a helpful way of getting focused and getting into the zone, whether you do breathing, visualization, both, listen to music, right? And just really focus on what you have ahead of you. And I think the fun can be incorporated in those values-based goals, right? Like, why am I coming to the show, right? The
Absolutely.
value might be to have fun with my horse, but that you still might want to be present for that, right? Versus being caught up in what's going to happen next or what happened before. So I think that's a really beautiful way to do that. And I think it's a good example of like what trainers have, you know, in their pack trunk of tools or their arsenal that they use at horse shows that make them look like they're not anxious. Because I'm sure that they feel anxious too at times, but they just have these tools that they use to help manage that.
And instead of having like a goal just for the big picture, I think, Vicky, that's great. There was a period of time that I went through. I didn't want a trainer at the show to warm me up that would introduce something new in the last 5 minutes. I'm like, look, I'm never going to be able to do that in 5. So I would rather not have someone and set my goal. Now it's changed a little bit, but I went through that period of time. I even went to shows out of my area, so that I went to shows where I didn't know everyone there. I didn't, I just wanted to go be with my horse. And I would set maybe 3 things that I wanted out of my test. I want to make sure that I'm using bend. I want to make sure that I'm prepping on the short side. And I would love it if, I don't get a comment of braced. That might be my 3 things. And then that was it. And then I had fun. Once they rang me in, it was like, it's all my toolbox. And then if I blew it, then I'd go back to the trainer and say, guess what? My toolbox wasn't very good. You know what I mean? I mean, I think we sometimes set these goals so big to say, oh, we're going to do all this at a show. Whereas if we can have that quiet time and set just a few things that you're happy with yourself that you can do.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
kind of awesome too.
Totally agree, because I know I think it was, I don't know, I think it was one of my first shows with the horse that I have now, and he was basically a baby dragon. And I felt very embarrassed, and we were out of control a lot. And and it was partly my fault because I wasn't grounded. I wasn't feeling my calmness and being able to impart that on him as well. But my trainer was like, his comment before I went in was, "Don't go for brilliance." And I'm like, I'm going in to just see if I can stay in the ring, you know? And and we did. And
Yeah,
it came out and I went, wow, we did it. We went through the whole test inside the ring. I'm good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That makes me think about something I didn't mention, which is like when we incorporate values into our goals, kind of like what you're talking about, right? Like goals that are smaller and maybe more values driven, then no matter what the outcome is, we will have succeeded in a certain way because we've lived by our value the entire time. And so even if the outcome isn't that we got X score or what, right? We did the whole thing through a place of living by our values. And that always feels good and really congruent, right? And nice to us. And the other thing I forgot to mention when you were talking about like getting to your lesson late and time to, someone mentioned having a groom, which I think can be super helpful for time saving. And then you have your moment to like get in the zone, right? I think another thing we can do that I didn't have listed here is during the grooming process, you can actually use that as a meditative thing,
Mhm.
especially because so many of us have done it so many times, right? That it's kind of muscle memory. And so then if you slow down and focus on, what does this brush feel like? What does the hair feel like today? Right? Like, how is this body feeling? What's warm? What feels warmer? How's my body feeling? So like not taking it for granted because we're like, okay, so I brush and I pick the hooves and I brush the mane and then tacking up, but really, really slowing down and focusing on everything as if you were an alien who's never done this before from another planet. Like you don't know what horses are, you don't know what this is. And in terms of embodying this curiosity, this newness, this slowness can be part of getting into the zone. If we don't have time, maybe we can use the grooming process to help with that.
Mhm.
Right. Well, that's my last slide. If anyone wants to stay in touch, please do. Or if anyone has lingering questions about anything we talked about, please let me know. Happy to share more. Love talking about this stuff.
Thank you so much. I think,
Yeah, it was really cool.
yeah, for many of us, you know, we try and it's not like we haven't dealt with it. It's just interesting. I found it really interesting when you were talking about the fact that your brain can bring back past experiences and just re-trigger you
Yeah.
from all of those things. And while I was sitting here, I totally got triggered and I thought, wow, look at that. I'm getting all sweaty because I'm thinking about this one, you know, horse show. And so having that ability to deal with it, like you were talking about, to put it into the present. I've always tried to actually go somewhere else in my head where I'm really happy and
Mm.
do the deep breathing and then come back. And I don't know whether that's good because one of the things you mentioned was trying to get to be present, be present, be present.
Yeah.
But when I'm present, sometimes I'm really nervous in that moment. So then the breathing, yeah, I understand the breathing. I've been practicing that for a long time, but sometimes it just like all falls apart. It's
Yeah.
easier for me to find somewhere else in my head that's quiet and then inch my way back in.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel about that? Is that like, if I don't want to be present in that moment because it's overwhelming, is
Yeah.
that okay?
Yes. So absolutely okay. I am always of the mindset that if something is working for you and it's working well, there's not really a need to change it, right? Also, we have so many different ways of coping with what comes up for us that are really important, and we never want to take those away before implementing new skills. Never, never, right? I would say the one thing that I often encourage riders to do is, if you can, start to let yourself be in the nervous a little longer before you go to somewhere else in your mind. Because what that does, right, is it starts to develop a comfort with the uncomfortable. Because being that nervous is very uncomfortable, right? So many of our first instincts is to avoid it, run away from it.
Mhm.
And so I work a lot, I encourage a lot in a slow transition for people to like dip their toes in and their foot in to being uncomfortable. Because if we can develop the knowledge and the ability to be like, oh, I'm feeling so nervous right now, and that is okay, and it will pass, right? Then that builds such a nice kind of structure for when things come up that you can't imagine away from, right?
Mhm.
Such as like much bigger events. So I wouldn't say that that's wrong or bad by any means. And I think there is skill to develop in the acknowledgement and the acceptance of however it is that we're feeling. And that also builds this nice level of self-trust, right? Because I think there's a myth around, if I turn toward it, it's going to get bigger. right? Like if I pay attention to it, then it's going to be so overwhelming and it's going to get bigger. And to be honest, the first time you do that, it very well might. But the skill in continuing to turn toward it is that eventually you'll turn toward it and be like, okay, it's just nervousness, right? I know what that feels like. It's just nervousness. And I know how to manage it, right? And remembering and staying present with like how to manage it. Because what we think and what we feel are separate from what we do, right? And so if we're able to just acknowledge and accept, I feel a certain way, but that doesn't mean it's going to change my actions, then it also makes it a little bit easier to sit with the nervousness for however long we can before we need to do whatever we need to cope and shift, right? You know, like sometimes we have to do that. I think a good example is like when we're at work and we feel a certain feeling, we have to just reroute. But if you can, then maybe later revisit so that you can process a little bit of it so that that rebound effect doesn't happen.
Got it.
That
Yeah.
would be my recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Build the self-confidence that I've got it. This
Yes.
is totally workable. Yeah.
Yes. This is just a feeling state and it'll pass like the weather does. Right.
Yeah.
Because I think that can get lost sometimes. We're like, oh, I feel a feeling and it's going to stay forever.
Yeah.
But it will eventually pass.
After I get off the horse.
Or
That
sometimes
doesn't take
you're
that long. Yeah.
on the horse. And
Oh,
it's like I second
exactly.
guess myself sometimes saying, when do I trust my gut that says you got this? Or I listen to someone else like the former owner with 40 mile an hour winds getting ready to get on my horse for the first time at Starvon, do the test for the first time. I was the last ride of the day. And she, as I was putting my foot in the stirrup, said, "You're not going to ride in this, are you?" And I said,
Yeah.
do you know something I don't know? Should I not be? And I turned to my trainer and I said, should I not be on this horse? I mean, I didn't know him that well, but I had a gut feeling that I had this, you know, and I'm like, look, there's going to be wind all the time. I gotta go. So she said, well, don't warm up by those trees. I said, well, I had no, I had no plan to warm up by the trees. I went in. It wasn't pretty. I mean, it was an okay test, but for the first time, it wasn't really pretty. It was my writing mistakes, but boy, I knew what I had. I had a partner and some moments that were fantastic. And I finished it, almost threw up, and then said, yeah, I did it. But I trusted my gut to do it. And he's a wonderful partner. But you know, how do you know when someone says that and you go, oh, I'm afraid. Should I be afraid? And then you go or you push yourself through the fear, then that could be, you know, really dangerous. So I'm like, I don't know. I just trust what my brain says. And if I say, if this doesn't feel good, like Heather in that warm up, I'd pack up and go home. I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's hard.
I think I'm very much a big proponent of trusting your intuition.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I've heard our intuition is, you know, one way to frame what our intuition is a massed information gathering that gives us actually pretty nice and somewhat predictive skills, right? And as equestrians, especially if we've been around horses for a really long time, we got pretty good intuition because we've gotten a lot of data, right? And so if you think about it that way, right? I'm big trust your gut always. And I think what can happen, especially at horse shows, is, or with certain trainers or certain other people at the barn, is they can actually give you their anxiety.
Yes.
Right? They can say, I would never ride in that. What are you doing? That's crazy. When they maybe should just keep their mouth shut. Right? But that can be hard because they're having a feeling that makes them uncomfortable and maybe they want to give it to someone else. Right? To process. That is something we do as people. Like most, like, you know, that's just a natural thing. We're like, oh wait, don't do that. And then we give that feeling to someone else. And when it's like someone is learning something new, that can be really helpful, right? When it's a trainer or someone who has skills, teaching someone who doesn't know, you can be like, wait, stop. That's not safe, right? But then, you know, for the most part, right? once you've ridden for a while, you don't need that kind of intervention anymore. So it can be a little bit muddling. And so in
Yeah.
that situation, the tools I'd recommend is taking a moment, just like you did, to say, wait a second, is this mine or is this theirs?
Yeah, okay, that applies to a bunch of things because
Yeah.
it's hard to get that little voice out of your head to say maybe they're right. Maybe what
and
if? What
if it's basically a what if and your gut doesn't change,
Mhm.
then it's most likely theirs.
Okay.
So you can imagine literally giving it back to them. Like, here you go. It's like a little gift for you. You can have the anxiety. I don't need it. You know, whatever
Yeah.
imagery helps you, right? In like, okay, that's not mine. That is their own stuff. That is their own stuff. And, you know, I'm going to go about my day.
Okay, well, if anybody, I think there were some questions in the chat. Did everybody get their questions answered? Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
We've all
pretty
been
much.
checking
So,
Okay, great.
through it.
Carolyn, are you the same Carolyn that comes out to Arriba Vista?
I am.
Oh,
Yes.
hi. Yeah. Okay, you don't recognize
Hi.
me without my ball cap on.
Yeah. That's your beautiful horses. I do some of the psychotherapy with horses groups out at the barn in Sonol. That's how I met Anne.
Yeah. So I bought up your website and I went, wait.
That's the same person.
I talk to her all the time.
Yeah, me and Lisa. Yeah.
There we go.
Awesome.
Cool.
We thank you so much for giving
Yeah, it
us
was
this
very,
time
very
and all of
good.
your
Thanks a lot.
information. Really
Absolutely.
helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we will definitely stay in touch. And I'll encourage, we get a lot of people that come on afterwards and watch as well. So they'll get your information, which is good because then they can reach right out to you. But we very much appreciate you doing this and you know, hope to see you again and especially at the horse shows, right?
Yes,
Right.
yeah. I hope to see you all again too. And it was lovely being here. As always, reach out if any burning questions are lingering or like, wait, I didn't get this thing. So I'm
All
around.
right. Great.
Great.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And thank